So you started this whole watercolor thing to create something satisfying and recognizable, right? Like you want a tulip to look like a tulip or a peony to kind of resemble a peony. You're with me, right? And you followed a bunch of tutorials that have like a long list of supplies maybe and specific colors of paint and it just feels like too much. I feel ya. Today though, we're gonna be painting 3 different flowers, realistic-ish, super satisfying, and each of them uses only 1 brush. And guess what? You use the paint you've got. Don't worry about what I'm using. Basically, if I'm using a green, you use your favorite green. And if I'm using a pink, use your favorite pink. And yeah, you get it. But when it comes to paper, I would definitely recommend trying to use 100% cotton, or you might get some effects that are a little bit different than mine. But again, use what you have, use what you love. Just know that if you don't use 100% cotton, things might look a little different, and that's okay. First up, a thistle, then a peony, and then a bougainvillea. I always feel like that flower, that last one, just gets lost in my mouth. Am I saying that right? It doesn't really matter. Let's get to it. Starting with a number 6 round and load that brush, half water, half paint. And start dabbing on some color and then swirl around the tip to create a lazy circle. And add some scratchy marks around the lazy circle. And you can kind of already see that top area where the purple is going to go. Now rinse your brush, grab some purple, and then start to dab in using the tip and some extra pressure in certain places. Now, rinse that brush and just put some clean water next to those purple lines you just made. Remember that thistle kind of sprays out from its base. I'm adding some pink and some blue now. Everything is emanating from where the purple meets the green. Look at that blue, really thin lines as you go out towards the edges to create that kind of prickly effect. And as I'm adding the detail here, the saturation, meaning the amount of pigment or paint on my brush, gets heavier. So it's more like juicy on dry. Now let's rewind and look at that again, friends. Pay close attention here to how I am using the tip of my brush versus the kind of body of my brush. And it really changes how the brush stroke looks. Rinsing that brush and loading up with a different green. I added a little blue to mine. Press, drag, and lift. In the beginning, I'm doing that kind of towards the center. I'm coming from out in towards the center. Let's rewind again and take a look at that press, drag, and lift. And the press here, as I start this first green leaf, is light. And then the press gets heavier towards the middle, and I lift again when I meet the base of that thistle green. And notice how I start to add other leaves around the base of that thistle green. Some are really thin, and some of the strokes are even disconnected or interrupted, and that just adds a lot of visual interest. So the important thing here in creating this kind of flutter of leaves at the base of the thistle green is variety. Variety of thickness, variety of pressure. And honestly, while those leaves are wet, you could even dab in a little bit of blue or blue mixed with purple to kind of give some dimension right away. I didn't do that, but you certainly could. Whenever the page is wet, that is an opportunity, friends. All right, rewinded one more time. We've got those base leaves in. Now take that loaded brush and just drag it down. It's kind of an interrupted drag for your stem. It does not need to be perfect. In my humble opinion, it looks more fresh and dynamic when it's not perfect. And then a few scratchy brush strokes. They're really just kind of a pull or tug on the brush, just letting it just hit the paper to give that faint suggestion of something green at the bottom. And now I'm gonna load up my brush with a little more green, a little bit of blue, a little bit of purple, and go back to the base of that thistle green and add a few little scratchy tick marks on the underside and a few select spots around that thistle green. And this is me adding detail. And because this area is pretty dry, I'm getting that nice, sharp, detailed brush stroke. Look at that, where I start to fill in the area a little bit heavier, and I'm getting a really convincing area of shadow. Now, I just dipped right into some brown while my brush was just damp and dabbed it a little bit at the base of the stem, and then a few little smileys going up that stem very lightly with the tip of my brush. And then what's left in my brush, I'm just adding a few areas of shadow where the leaves meet the base of the thistle green. Let's take a look at that again, friends. Something to think about when you're adding shadow. Of course, you want the saturation or the ratio of paint to water to be heavier, more paint than water. You're gonna get that nice, strong, juicy finish on your paint when it hits the paper. And then you wanna make sure that you're just adding little dabs and touches where two elements or details meet one another. So in this case, where those leaves, that flutter of leaves that's on the underside of the thistle green. And if you're wondering what the heck a thistle green is, that's what I'm calling that kind of bulbous green area underneath the purple flower area. So where that thistle green meets the leaves, there's a shadow there, and just dab in some darkness, you'll be good to go. Now I'm gonna take that same approach to adding shadow to the green as I am to the purple. And right where the purple meets the top of the thistle green, I am adding in some really concentrated, thin and dabby strokes of watercolor. A little bit of brown is on my brush, a dark purple, a little bit of blue, lots of paint, not a lot of water, and just dab, dab, dab in where those two elements meet. And friends, you have it. Okay, thistle is done. How are we feeling? We have 2 more flowers to go, but I'm thinking you might be feeling that tingle. Yeah, where you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so good, so fun. Let me know if you're feeling that in comments. Give me a yay or a hey or a whatever. I just want to know that you're here and you're having a good time. And while you're at it, go ahead and you know what I'm going to ask. Give this video a boop, friends. What's a boop? It's a like, and it really helps out my channel. Most importantly though, it helps others like you find this channel and get on their path to watercolor freedom. And that's really what's most important to me. Next up is our peony, and I'm using a 3/4 inch dagger brush. Just want to talk about that for a moment. It's not a common brush. You could replace it with like a number 12 or a number 16 round. Or you could replace it with like a 3/4 inch flat wash brush. It's going to give you very similar effects. If you happen to have the 1/4 inch or the 1/2 inch dagger from my own brush collection, definitely use those as well. You're just going to need to be adding more quantity of brush strokes to get the same shape petals. Remember, this is 1 brush flowers today, friends, and 1 brush is all you need, I promise. Now for these first strokes, I am using a little bit of peach mixed with a fuchsia. Use what you have, friends. If you only have a red, just add a little bit of water to your red and do a red peony. It's all good. And before we paint, and take a look on screen, you can see what I'm doing and how this painting is going to progress, but I promise we're going to go back to the beginning. But I want you to look at your brush. Whether you actually have a 3/4 inch dagger or you have the 1/2 inch or you're using a big round brush. Look at the shape that the bristles make. Like, just wet the brush a little bit and just look, because that shape, when you kind of do a medium press and lift, or even a press and swipe or drag on the page, that is basically the shape you're going to get. Now, depending on the angle that you apply that pressure and depending on how long you drag, that will change the shape. So with this 3/4 inch dagger, I kind of already have my shape determined. And it's actually really exciting because I'm going to use that and leverage that shape to my advantage. Let's get into it. First things first, decide where your petals are going to converge. This is a side view peony where all of the petals are kind of coming at you or facing upwards, and with a few coming out on either side. As you start laying your brush strokes down, you're just going to press and drag in one particular direction for each stroke, but thinking about the fact that each of those strokes starts from a converging point where all the petals kind of tuck in and once were a bud, and just continue. Those 2 strokes on the bottom are the ones facing me, and those thinner strokes coming out from the side, you guessed it, those are the side view. The 2 strokes that are right now just kind of facing upwards at an angle, yep, you guessed it. They are your front-facing petals that are coming towards you straight on. Whereas those bottom 2 petals, those are almost hanging down to the ground. Stick with me, friends. I know peonies at this angle are complicated, but once you get a feel for that convergence idea where all the petals are coming from one area, you're going to be golden. Let's take a look again. I've got my 2 hanging to the ground petals. I've got the few skinny ones coming out from the side. And then I've got the few short ones that are coming right at me. And those are the most squat petals, the ones coming right at me that I just added in that brighter fuchsia. Now, once you get to the top petals. The petals that are facing up straight towards the sky, you can kind of do whatever you want in terms of their shape. They're a little bit more straightforward. Now, I feel like I need to add a little yellow, a few dabs of yellow. I'm trying not to touch too much of the pink so they don't bleed into one another right now. And then I'm going back to my peach pinky mix, and we're gonna continue making some of those petals that are shooting straight up to the sky. And friends, you have it. This peony is appearing right before your eyes. A little tip here, I love this particular spot. If we just stopped here, this little love is so beautiful, right? And this is a really quick way to exercise your peony skills. So if you're still feeling unsure at this point, don't move on to the leaves. I'm about to move on to the leaves, but don't. Try this 5 times and don't belabor it. Time yourself. Give yourself 1 minute for each of the 5 times you try this. And I guarantee by the end of your 5th one, you're gonna feel a little bit more confident. Now, that explanation was a little bit like wordy, and I don't want to say complicated, but it was a lot. So head into comments, let me know which questions you have. If you were confused about a particular way I described something, let me know and I will get back to you and try to clarify. And heck, if you think there's a better way to describe what I did on screen, go ahead into comments and let others know. This is a community and this is what I love about it. We all have something to offer. All right, moving on to those leaves. Rinse your brush so we get nice clean greens. Load up. You're gonna have a good amount of paint and water on that brush, and you're gonna do an upstroke for that stem, really simple, and then a press, drag, and lift starting from the outer edges and going into the underside of that flower. I did 4 leaves to start. Let's look at that again. And those 4 leaves, notice they too converge back at the converging point of the flower as a whole. Watch. 1 back to the center, 2 back to the center, 3, they're all facing back to the center, even though each leaf has its own curvature, its own length, its own personality. They are all going back to home base. With all of these leaves, I am letting the tip of my brush lead the stroke. So I am using light pressure to get that nice fine point when I start the stroke, and then intensifying my pressure as I get to the middle of the stroke. And the same applies for those 2 leaves that are at the base of the stem. And friends, for those 2 leaves at the base of the stem, I didn't reload. I just let the paint that was on my brush run out. Now friends, going in with my beloved liner brush, and I'm just mixing up a more intense version of the same pink I've been using with a little bit of added red. So peach, fuchsia, and some red. And I'm just going in and adding select little linear details. You don't have to do this. This is my own style. It's what I love to do. You might want to just leave your peony as the washy loveliness that it was before I started adding these lines, and that's a-okay. I am following the contour of the petals. I am not putting these lines everywhere, and I'm still thinking about that convergence point because I still want those lines, those linear details, to go back to that convergence point that is essentially underneath the peony that we see right now. And I'm adding, of course, some darker green. Mix your favorite green with a little bit of blue, maybe some brown, even a little bit of pink, and you're gonna have the most gorgeous contrasty color to use for more intense detail on those leaves. I gotta tell you what, friends, this is one of the favorite peonies that I've painted in a long time. Let me know if you're excited about trying this one. Head into comments. Now, moving on to the tongue twister of a flower, the bougainvillea. This one is going to be a nice way to kind of just release and relax a little bit. Definitely more freestyle. Let's get into it. Oh yeah, and also I cheated a little bit. I know I said 1 brush, but it was kind of 2, but it's okay. And I'll be honest, this next flower, I don't stop at just 1 brush. However, you totally could, and that's the beauty of it. I'm gonna be using a number 6 cat's tongue in this particular painting to start. And what's important about that 1 brush is that literally you could use that brush the entire time. Now, I like to be extra and I come in with a detail brush and yada, yada, yada. But let me say this, you absolutely don't have to. And in fact, I would recommend you try not to. If you have a cat's tongue, use it to its fullest potential. It's got that nice heavy, wide body that comes to a gorgeous, gorgeous point, and you've got everything you need. We'll start out wet on dry with a nice juicy red on our brush. That brush is pretty wet, and we're gonna press and lift, press and lift. There's a very slight drag there. 3 petals, that's it. They converge at one point in the middle. 1, 2, 3, press and lift. And notice how the paint is starting to run out as I get to the end with the lift. And then a few single petals in there. Boom, boom, boom. Let's take a look at that again. Notice the first collection of 3 petals is the largest, or it's going to be the largest. The next is much smaller. And then the next collection of 3 petals is medium size. So, you know, it's like baby bear, mama bear, daddy bear. And then add a few little touches, dabs, petals in there that are singular. Now, add some water to your brush. Don't necessarily fully rinse, and go next to some of those petals and let that red bleed out a little bit. And then a few more dabs. And now you can start to see the arc of this bougainvillea branch appear. And notice, look at all the fine detail that I'm getting with this one brush. Now I'm adding a few more of those trios of petals as I go and further define this arc. Now, grab your favorite green, press, drag, and lift, press, drag, and lift. Same thing, you're making little collections of leaves in select areas. If this is your first time trying a flower like this, just follow my lead exactly, and then you can kind of go rogue and try your own composition afterwards. Notice how I'm definitely varying the pressure, therefore the size of the leaves. They're getting tinier at the end of this arc. And look at that. I am literally creating this crazy, like organic kind of skinny moment at the end of this arc. And that's the thing with bougainvillea. They're very curious, viney, and they are just creepy crawly. They go everywhere. So trying to actually paint a single bougainvillea can be really tricky, but I think we're doing all right here. Added a stem on the other end, and then I'm just going in and filling with some press and lift, press and lift. Notice I've changed my green. If you only have one green on your palette, mix a little blue or a little red with that one green, and you will end up with a huge range of other greens you can use throughout. Let's take a look at that again and just notice how I'm slowly filling in this arc, this vine of bougainvillea. You're probably wondering, Christy, how do you determine the arc? Like, do you think about it beforehand, the shape of it? Yes, I do. I, in general, think about it once I've established a few of the larger bloom clusters at the very beginning. I start to think about, okay, which way is it going to arc? And as I'm building, I'm thinking the whole time, I want to keep that kind of arc going. And then I really start to fill in and it takes shape. You want to have more weight at the kind of bottom of that arc. In this particular composition, that works really well, and then have a lighter, airier kind of feel at the end of the arc or the end of the vine in this case. Now, friends, you can see I have not brought in another brush to this point. This could be called done. This is gorgeous, impressionistic bougainvillea. Now, this is the extra time, the extra moment of my video, and I'm going to go in with this 000 detail brush, and I'm just going to add some line work, and I'm going to let you take a look here, and you'll have to let me know what you think. Should I have left it, or do you like the addition? And friends, honestly, I could have done this with the very tip of that cat's tongue. It would have been a little bit more difficult. It would have taken a little bit more control, but it could have been done. Woo, we made it, friends. I gotta know, which of these 3 blooms are you gonna try first, or did you paint along with me? I am so excited. And you know what? If you painted along with me and you're ready to go and you have some time for 6 more single blooms, this is the video for you. Don't miss it. It's one of the most popular on this channel. And until next time, I wish you so much happy painting.